Hey there, welcome to another album review, and today we have the Prodigy with the album The Fat of the Land. Now, interestingly, the Prodigy is at least something that I always sort of knew. It's kind of very interesting because it sort of overlaps with the story that I gave yesterday of Propeller Ads, of me knowing that it sort of was a thing, but I'd never actually heard anything from them or whatever. And actually, this time I actually faintly remember the name because of a Need for Speed Most Wanted song that is on that soundtrack. And on top of that, the album was chosen because the Little Crab was recommended to me. I think it was the song Breathe that got recommended to me on YouTube. And I was like, wait, I know this song. Oh, hold up. Essentially, basically I'm just realizing that this is actually a really popular artist and not one of those very fucking obscure 90s EDM artists that never did anything afterwards. So yeah, it was very interesting to discover just how just popular essentially the artist was. And the album opens with Smack My Bitch Up, which I actually knew from movies. It's actually a song I didn't know the song itself or the name, but I didn't even know it was from this artist, but I now I can sort of see why the artist is so popular. But yeah, and the interesting part is I actually think the melodies that come after the lyrics are actually more iconic than the lyrics themselves, right? Because I actually think that a lot of people tend to remember the lyrics, sure, but I think a lot more people remember after the lyrics than during the lyrics, basically. The song actually also progresses, which it's actually really cool because it's catchy, right? So it's sort of addictive because of the catchiness of the sounds, but it also makes the song a lot interesting because you actually do have some progress. So as a result, you have something to keep it fresh, right? It's not always the same thing. It's not repetition ad nauseum, and I actually think this is actually the big difference between Propeller Ads and Prodigy. So yesterday, one of the reasons that's why I kind of just forgot stuff is because while it was good, it didn't have anything to sort of stand out. It didn't have any sounds that were changing, that kept things fresh, that made the songs worth listening to in a way, right? It was mostly just sort of background fodder, and that's fine, not every song needs to be iconic, but I think that's the big difference between the Prodigy and the Propeller Ads. And then the second song of the album, Breath, is actually, well, the song that got recommended to me, so yay. Basically, it's a song that I don't know where I heard it before, but I know I actually knew it already, and it's very interesting because it has sort of this catchiness, but at the same time, again, it's super interesting because it keeps changing itself rather than just being repeat ad nauseum. It's just I think that the best part about this album, and it's also reflected in this song, which is essentially the playful of the sounds, right? You never really have the same sound over and over, right? Except for the beat. The beat tends to be pretty consistent, but outside of the beat, there's a lot of different sounds and everything that are played with, right? Which really sells the song and really sells it keeps the song fresh and it keeps the song interesting, as opposed to just sort of sitting there, okay, it's a good song but nothing really happens, right? And I think that it's that interest of you never really know where the song goes from there that sort of keeps you engaged with it and keeps you hearing more and keeps you sitting there okay, I gotta make sure that I'm paying attention to see if something is gonna come out of it. Interestingly enough, though, I actually didn't really pay that much attention to the lyrics. I think here the lyrics are much more in the background than they are in the foreground. Definitely the sounds are the main thing, and the lyrics are more to just sort of give, I would say, flavor to the sounds more so than being the main thing. And that's actually interesting because the third song on the album, Diesel Power, actually tends to be much more focused on the lyrics themselves and on the singing itself. It has a much more hip-hop focus, which usually hip-hop is not my jam, I'm gonna be honest. I don't generally enjoy hip-hop, but I think the reason is why I can actually stomach a lot of the late 90s, early 2000s hip-hop, especially from video game soundtracks and everything, as to why even I enjoy them. I think it's simply because there's a bigger focus on creating interesting sounds to go alongside the rapping, And I think that's really important, right? Because in the 90s and the 2000s, I think that a lot of electronic music was still developing, and you had so many like subgenres being played with when it came to specifically electronic, right? So a lot of hip hop tended to be much more diverse with the sounds that they offered, specifically the sounds themselves. So like nowadays, look, don't get me wrong, from what I hear, the sounds are still interesting, sure, but they all seem to put in focus a lot more the rapping, whereas here it seems that it's sort of like 50-50, where like the rapping serves the sounds like the previous songs, but the sounds also serve the rapping, which is sort of like this cool mix that you end up doing. So I think it's much more like balanced, and there's definitely a lot more creativity when it comes to that, because you end up having a lot more pathways to go from and to when it comes to having two things you can play with, as opposed to just being okay, the rap and the sounds need to service the rap, so they can't be super complicated, or they can't be like really obstructing the rapping or whatever, because the rapping is what matters, right? I think that here you don't have that much happening at all, and because of the evolution and the creativity and just people playing with sounds and playing with a lot of the electronic music that was still developing at the time, you also have a lot more just differences, and you have a lot more diversity in sounds, especially in hip-hop songs, because you just sort of have a lot more to choose from, where nowadays everything sort of seems more consolidated, and people just sort of know exactly what they want. Back then was sort of more of the Wild West when it came to electronic music, so a lot of hip-hop sounds tended to just try and use a lot of them and play on a lot of them, and just sort of create a lot more uniqueness to them, and just have the sort of spice, that sort of like flavor that I think a lot of modern hip-hop songs don't tend to have as much. Like, again, look, I'm not huge into hip-hop, so like I'm not saying this from a position of someone who's like a huge fan or anything like that, but from at least what hits the mainstream, what charts, what's popular, that's what I can attest to, right? Because what's popular outside of like a couple of artists, most hip-hop artists that are really popular don't really have that interesting sounds and everything. Because like even in this song, right, you do have moments, and throughout the rest of the album it's the same thing. A lot of other songs in the album tend to also have like sort of these hip-hop sort of flair to them, and even then, like, a lot of them have very interesting sounds to sort of play with, right? It's the same thing with Breathe. Breathe actually has a lot of or Breath, I guess, it's a lot or has a lot of I guess singing, hip hop to it, right? A lot of rapping to it, but you remember a lot of the sounds as well, sort of you remember the mix of both of them rather than just one or the other, right? And I think that's where a lot of the early hip-hop was on, where nowadays is a lot specifically like the lyrics, and it's a lot like specifically the rapper and the way they're rapping, as opposed to the sound. Like oftentimes the sound falls very into the background, and I think that's what I've really enjoyed. I think a lot of I think that's what I enjoyed a lot about this album, is that, yeah, sure, a lot of it also seems to have some roots definitely on hip-hop and everything, especially because they did have a singer, or at least the group does seem to have a singer, and a lot of the songs have lyrics, even if it's just like a phrase or two or something like that, but it seems that they're more, I guess, together and fused together, and sort of this mix, as opposed of just the sound service, the rapping, and that's pretty much it, right? So pretty much that's what I like about this album. Actually, it showcases a little bit of everything, right? Yeah, it does have hip-hop, right? It has some nice beats and everything, but it also has a lot of different sounds and a lot of different inspirations from sounds, right? Like you sometimes have a little bit more distorted, sort of this acid techno sounds, sometimes it's more on the early art style type sounds, you know what I mean? Like there's a lot of just trial and error, I guess, in these albums, and it's definitely one of the reasons why I think I actually ended up enjoying it quite a bit without necessarily falling into the repetition, because that's usually a problem with EDM, is it's like really easy to just fall into repetition. So yeah, that's pretty much it in terms of my vibe meter. I would say I'm gonna give it like a solid 8 out of 10. It's what I'm feeling, but I don't know, like I feel like I enjoyed it more than that, but I think an 8 out of 10 right now, pretty solid. So yeah, I'll see you tomorrow with a new album review.